Steve, you've been involved in the controversy community for many years. You're a very big league. I'm very interested to hear how the ages have been represented in the community. Because now there are young kids and older people and everyone in between dancing together. Has that always been the case, or has that been more recent?
It's fairly recent. Yes, when I used to bring my daughter when she was like 7th grade, 8th grade, there was nobody that age, there was no college kids. Talking about maybe the Greenfield dance started out just twice a month on, I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday night, but there was just no college kids. And so my daughter didn't think it was cool at all until one night, for some strange reason, 4 college boys showed up. And here's these 2 girls that are, like, shall we say, rather well developed for their age, one of whom dressed rather scantily, and my daughter dressed very conservatively. And those college boys, they didn't realize they were just like 7th and 8th graders. And they kept asking, well, what college do you go to and stuff. And on the way home, my daughter would say to me, what should we tell them? I don't want them to know we were just 7th and 8th grade. Forget it, I don't want to lie to them. It was a good kid to hone your communication skills as respected. But anyway, that was the first time since she was a little teeny girl. On the way home, they taken me all the way home. They said, Dad, can we come again next week? And you know, I bribed them to come because they were old enough to leave home. And my wife was always out playing in a band or something. And so they were more interested, but there was still. And those 4 boys never showed up again, by the way. But they finally realized it could be more fun than they thought, because everybody there was old enough to be their parents. One of them. I was.
Oh my gosh, hold on.
See that?
Yeah, we saw that.
Yes.
When there's nothing going on up there.
That's a good point. It's a metal ceiling, which is very strange. But
Well, it was standard practice when this place was built.
that's
Stores,
Very
banks,
true.
everything had metal ceilings, just like that.
Alright. Well, Mr. Sweet, what were you talking about earlier? I don't know if we got it.
if you mentioned that your daughter.
About in the 80s, in the early 80s, when this dance started in this hall, maybe one time one parent would bring a kid, another time another parent might bring another kid. That was it. And my daughter and my girlfriend didn't think it was cool at all, and they really didn't want to be here. Until these 4 college boys showed up one night. And they thought those girls were college girls, and they were almost great, you know. And on the way home, my daughter said to me for the first time in her life, can we come again next week? Well, I used to have to drag them here. I couldn't believe she said that. But then she started enjoying it. But those college boys never showed up again. Many of them. And I think I know how it got started here and also in the Boston area to have more and more younger people, high school and college kids do it. And I should say blame, give the credit to a mother who lived in somewhere up near Norwich, Vermont. And when her younger days, she did all kinds of folk dancing and everything. And they homeschooled their kids. You can get homeschooled kids to do things with adults and feel comfortable about it, whereas the normal kids in school, they're only comfortable talking to someone their own age, and they clamor and they act unfriendly and hold people to talk to. So she brought those 4 kids down here, and I guess they had already been dancing up at the dances in Norwich, Vermont, and they took right to it. And once in a while, some teenage kid or 2 or 3 look in the door and not see anybody their age and just not even come in, you know. That was enough for them. The music was strange to them, you know, although it was the kind of music we enjoyed all our lives. So anyway, those 4 homeschooled kids. And so they'd come back the next time and they'd bring another homeschooled kid. And another one. And then 2 more next time. There's quite a network of homeschool kids. They don't live an isolated life like some people think. Their parents do everything they can to get them out into the public and deal with other adults and other kids and everything. Until finally they reached what I like to call the critical mass. So that when other kids came and they looked at the door, they would see kids their own age having fun and laughing and smiling. And yes, there were a lot of adults there, but there were some kids their own age, not just 1 or 2, but maybe 8, 10, 12, and gradually it just built and built and built. And I think in the Boston area, how the same thing got started was the children of people who had contributed for many, many years and finally got married and had kids, even 1 or 2 kids, and they would bring the kids to a dance, probably drag them there the same way I had to drag my daughter, until there were enough of those kids that got to know each other and they could, and of course, MySpace, well, now it's Facebook, but MySpace was one of the first social networks. They could contact each other and ask, well, where are you going tonight? And pretty soon they started developing a lot of college-age high school kids in the Boston area. The same has happened here. And all it takes is a kid who really grew up liking contra dancing and not thinking it was terrible to go out with their parents, to go to somewhere like Smith College, say, and started with MySpace or Facebook and try to round up and locate other kids who felt the same way. And there's, in each freshman class, there's usually only 2 or 3 in the whole darn class, you know. But with Facebook and everything, they can browbeat some of their older non-contra dance friends, and they come up here and they have a ball. In fact, one girl said, what did she say? Oh, I know, she said to one of us, you know, this is a lot more fun than going to a bar. You know, guys, they hit on you seriously at a bar. Here, you don't get that feeling that the older guys are hitting on the young girls, you know, really don't. So I think it's once you get that critical mass, they don't care what kind of music it is, as long as other kids their own age are having fun. And this thing about, I think this thing about contra dancing, which is extremely unusual in every culture in the world, to dance every dance with someone else is extremely unusual. It doesn't happen in Canada at their square dancing. They come with somebody, they stick with them like glue all evening, you know, like normal people. If you go out on a date with somebody, you expect to stick with them all evening, don't you? You don't expect to go to a dance and have your partner say, well, okay, I'll see you at intermission, and leave you sitting there, you know, if you're a new person. That has turned a lot of people off. My daughter had a hell of a time finding boyfriends which she could get into contra dancing. Oh, they'd come and sit around and she'd dance the first dance and they couldn't understand why the old people would keep coming up and asking her to dance. Well, they had known her since she could walk, you know, and had been dancing regularly with her, and she thought it was fun. And so she'd dance with a couple of them, and all they'd do is sit there and say, oh, can we leave now? Well, you know, they get there, look at whether it's a male or a female, and they don't know a single person there, and they feel stupid because there's these people doing stuff they don't know how to do, and they're afraid somebody's going to frown at them if they make a mistake. And it's tough to get it started, but once you get the ball rolling, those kids will show up. And I think the same thing is happening up in Montpelier, Vermont, too. And in Shepherdstown, is that in Virginia or West Virginia?
West Virginia.
That's big time young people. Probably the biggest proportion of young people anywhere. Well, I guess they got some of them to volunteer to be on the committee and do work and everything else. High school kids, you know. Pretty soon they're practically running the show. And us old folks, we think that's great. A good Saturday night here. Last Saturday night we had maybe was a good example. You'd have over 200 people, half of them under 30, including a bunch of high school, larger bunch of college and post-college, and they just keep coming back, bringing other people, and it's very slowly growing.
Do the people, the older people, feel comfortable with the younger people, the younger crowd that keeps coming in? Is it sort of?
I think here they do. Yeah. I think that one of the reasons that it died out, you know, contra dancing was almost dead, except in southern New Hampshire during the 30s and maybe even the 40s. And it was because the old people didn't want to put up with young people's shenanigans, and they didn't want to put up with people who didn't already know how to dance, much less clowning around. They didn't like that. Well, I guess we're willing to put up with it as long as they keep it cool and don't do some dangerous things, like dipping the girls upside down. That's a recent phenomenon. You must have seen some of that Saturday night, no?
Not Saturday night. I have seen a couple people dip the women and flip them upside down at the downtown Amherst stands.
Right.
I usually tense up and hope that nobody has to call 911.
Well, the most heavily attended dance in the Boston area is at the Concord Scout House on Thursday nights. They also have a dance there every Monday night, every Thursday night, and most Saturdays and Fridays, occasionally a Sunday thing. And we're not talking about what you call family dances with little kids, where you aim it at the little kids. We're talking college kids, high school kids who can dance right along with the adults and have a ball. But at the Scout House, they say, I haven't seen this so far to go into another week, but there's a fireplace on one side of the hall, and that line in front of the fireplace is the young people's line, and they can clown around all they want and dip the girls. And it's not that older people can't dance in that line if they want to. And some do. And some of the young people take a break and go dance in the adult lines. But it's not the law. I mean, the young people just sort of took over. There's enough of them to form a whole line to the back of the hall. That's the amazing thing. Yeah.
How does contra dance in the Pioneer Valley differ from contra dance outside? So say Greenfield versus Boston, or Greenfield versus Peterborough or Brattleboro? Or even
Well,
your dancing
in Greenfield, in Brattleboro, it's just about the same as it is here, and probably also in Montpelier. But David Millstone in Norwich, Vermont, I think his dancing twice a month. He's a little more in control, and most of the Boston callers, I don't want to say control freaks, but if they're dyed in a little Boston collar, they're more authoritative. Like, for example, the first time I ever got invited to call it that Thursday night dance, when it was actually in Cambridge, I hadn't been back to Boston for quite a number of years, and didn't know exactly what to expect. So I get up there and I get all ready, and there's 5 lines of people forming, you know, and they're all chit-chatting and talking to each other. And the minute the first syllable came out of my mouth, all of a sudden the room was quiet as a tomb. And I thought, oh my God, what did I say something wrong or what? Well, the Boston callers demand that those people shut up and listen. They don't use those words, but they know who's the boss. Whereas here, the whole country dance movement here really got started with Cammy Keener and his cousin David. And David still runs Twice a Month Dances on Friday, and Cammy's in Melrose in the Boston area. And they would let, Cammy was a clowner around. And Boston people considered the way we danced here, this is in the 70s and 80s, as kind of rough house. Yeah, well, things have calmed down, and the young people, I think they're not rough housing, they're improvising, let's say, twirling the girls and all that stuff.
Have you ever been to a dance in Glen Echo, Maryland?
Oh yeah. I've been there on a Friday. I've been there on a Saturday even, but that wasn't contra dancing, it was swing. And Sunday. I used to stop there every time when I got to call at the Buffalo Gap camp in West Virginia, just over 80 miles from there, and make sure that we stayed an extra night, me and my daughter, and went to the Glen Echo dance. Oh yeah.
I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia, so I went to the Glen Echo dance when I was home for spring break, and I can't quite articulate what was different about the Glen Echo dance, but I know it has a very different feel from a Greenfield dance or a downtown Amherst dance. I was wondering if you can offer any insight that I don't have to explain why it was different.
I think it all goes back to when it got started and was kind of a rough house dance. There were a lot of improvising and crazy things going on. And
in Glen Echo or in
here, Greenfield,
okay.
Yes. And I thought of an example, but now I forgot what I was going to say. Of course, when the Boston people came to dance in Greenfield, and the crowds in Boston always averaged 15 to 20 years older on average than what we had here, always, even way back. Because this was the movement started really in the 70s, the Dudley Laughlin revival, that's what it was, and what was left of it. And that's where the Caners really picked up and carried it forth.
How far east did the Dudley Laughlin revival go? Was it concentrated to the Pioneer Valley?
Are you kidding? Well, of course, a lot of it was up and down the Pioneer Valley, but it was all over New England. And people would drive, young people, they'd drive all day to come to a Dudley dance up in southern New Hampshire somewhere. That's where he was strongest. And when it was over, they'd drive all the way home to D.C. or somewhere. And eventually, they decided to start dances in their own communities. Whereas in California, for example, most of that got started with people who came to Boston, where everybody behaved themselves, and went to MIT or somewhere and fell in love with contra dancing and went back home and started contra dance movements on the West Coast, the modern day movements. And of course, in the Boston area, it got started with Ralph Page, who cracked the whip, and there was no fun business when he was calling, I'll tell you right now. I don't know if I should tell you this funny story or not, but this is before there was all this dipping and everything. That's a recent thing, but quite a few years ago, there was one couple who lived, one in Albany and one in just north of Boston, and they only get together and meet in the middle, or he'd go out there, she'd come here, and they'd come to the Greenfield dance. And when they do a ladies' chain, instead of doing a courtesy turn, if his partner was coming toward him, they'd stand there and they'd cuddle a little bit, or maybe dip a little bit. It didn't become an epidemic at that time, but there was an awful lot of cuddling going on. It was the only couple who thought of doing anything like that, you know. And so we went to the Ralph Page weekend one time, and one of the old ladies, she still comes, I'm glad I don't know her name because I might say it, she went up to them and says, no, we don't allow that kind of thing here. You know? And so later on in the chow line, they happened to be in front of me, and the guy, I don't want to mention his name, he turned around and says to me, "Do you think it's okay if we hold hands in the chow line?" But now we have all the young people doing things like that, you know, and thinking nothing of it. And the old people, like me, they're darn glad to have them here. And if we have to put up with a little clowning around, we'll do it and not get all upset, you know?
I have a question about Dobie Laufman's calling style. Ian and I recently watched the Other Way Back, the Dobie Laufman.
Oh, good, yeah.
Ian and I recently watched the Dudley Laufman documentary, The Other Way Back, Dancing with Dudley, and we watched your interview as well. And I was fascinated because I've spoken with a few people at the Greenfield Grange about Dudley Laufman's calling style, and everyone I've spoken to has said that he was a very, very rigid caller, and that it was his way or get out. And then that's not the impression the documentary gave at all. I was wondering if you could speak to that from your experiences.
Of course, when he got started, he was calling all of the standard old contradances and some of the ones that Ralph Page wrote, which were a lot more swinging and stuff than the really old dances. And then he made a trip to England and learned all these so-called whole set dances that they were doing over there. And he came back and then started falling off because he wasn't calling real, what we call real contradancing anymore. He was calling all these, well, what most of us considered stupid English dances, whole set dances, you know. And that's all I can say to that. But Dudley's style of teaching and calling, if you can call it teaching, by the way, only worked if you had a preponderance of experienced dancers. It was often, I heard quite a few reports, that if he went into, like a church might sponsor him, because they'd heard about how wonderful contra dancing was. I shouldn't be saying this, I don't like. But anyway, it could be a disaster, because he didn't really know how to teach from scratch to people who knew absolutely nothing. Of course, now he's only doing children's programs anyway, right? You know about that?
I didn't actually.
Yeah, gets the PTA to chip in or get grants or something. Grades, which is good, because I think it teaches those little kids how to have fun. However, I think that teaching of square dancing in 4th and 5th grade, that there was a lot of that going on, you know. Springfield College used to promote that, you know, they're known for their athletics and everything. It just wasn't fun, because boys in 4th grade do not want to hold hands with girls, you know.
They have cooties.
Yes, right. And so, they got to be teenagers, and you try to talk them into something like that, they say, "Oh, we did that in 4th grade." So,
It wasn't cool enough.
yeah. And besides, it's something for little people, 4th graders, us teenagers, sophisticated for that. Oh, you know, it's good.
I actually have one other question. I'm hoping the mic will pick it up. When people ask me to describe contra dance, I say it's fun, first and foremost, and then it's sort of a mixture between square dancing and line dancing. And as horrible as that sounds, it's fun. How have you had much more
Well, their experience at organizing and recruiting at Brown University was, you want to try to get people to come to a contra dance, don't tell them it's like square dancing or folk dancing, because they'll run the other way. Right away. All they can think of in square dancing is what modern square dancing was done with modern Western style, with those funny costumes, and it's all done by really old people. And so what they did was real funny little posters. I see London, I see France, contra dance. You know, little sayings like that, right? That was one of their posters. I can't remember some of the others. But all kind of posters like that saying live music and what fun it is, but they never told them what it was.
Okay.
And this Julia Nichols, you know her?
I don't.
She's a minimum of 100 people at a college dance, and it's still going on.
Exclusively for college students?
No, it's not exclusive. They coordinated it with another regular country dance 15 miles further out. Rehoboth, maybe you've heard of it.
Oh, I have.
It's supposed to be a really fun dance, not terribly big, but a lot of fun. So they're on the opposite Fridays, so there's interchange between the two groups. And you go there and you get adults mixing in with the college kids and nobody thinks anything of it. I think it's good for the kids to have to mix with people older than them. I think it'll give them a little more confidence where they ever get a job or a job interview or go to a different college. They'll have to talk to the hierarchy now, the teachers, and they can feel they get practice so that they feel more at ease instead of running up and stuttering and being intimidated, you know.
That's one of the things that I find most fascinating about the contra community, just the fact that kids can dance with the older people and everyone's comfortable. And
Yeah.
there aren't many places where that happens, or aren't many activities.
Another funny thing is, when I first started, normal people, they would introduce the kid, and they would say, this is Mr. Summers, or Mrs. Summers. Now, it's all first names. No matter that I'm almost 82 years old, and the kid's in 4th grade now. So, it just kind of worked out that way. I don't know why.
I don't know if I'm quite comfortable with that. I was raised by my grandparents, and it was always Mr. and Mrs.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, it's all what you brought up.
but I guess I'm learning that the contra community in this area, because I haven't explored it really outside of my area, that in this area, contra is very liberal, if I can talk over the snare drum.
Yeah. Well, you'll notice, I'd say 95% or more single people. Yeah.
I was speaking with Lil Loving from the Downtown Amherst Contra Dance on Wednesday, and I told him I was looking into the multi-generational aspects of contra dance. I was trying to answer the question, why do so many different generations flock to contra dance? And his answer was to play a part of it, and then he said it's that people like to be touched, and people like to have physical contact with other people.
Well, there are some people who they've never been touched by anybody else other than their mother or
spouse.
something. Yes. And they just draw back at that and they never show up again. They just can't stand all these people touching me. And I don't even know them. So it weeds some people out.
Ralph Sturgeon, I don't know if you know, he's one of the dancers.
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay.
I know him.
Okay. My goodness. We really are in
That's
touch.
the contra dancing started,
Yes.
obviously.
Ralph Sturgeon said to me the first time I went to a contra dance, just check your personal space at the door. You lost it.
Yeah.
You can pick it up when you leave, but it's in the coat room, and just deal with it. And that was the best piece of advice I received.
A lot of that, but yeah.
And I have experience with ballroom dancing and salsa dancing, so I've been in contact with older people before in physical contact for dancing. But contra is very different. I think it's because there's so much spinning, and it was nice to have someone explain that I was probably going to feel uncomfortable. And I knew that was normal, so that was a cool thing.
Are you ready for another funny story?
Of course.
Okay, there was this 40-ish woman who used to come to the dance all the time. And I didn't know anything about her except her name, which I've now forgotten. And one day she said to me about my 17-year-old daughter. Hi. And I said,
Hello. I saw you come in and disappear. I was a little worried.
yeah. Anyway, she brought her 17-year-old daughter, and she had never been to a contra dance before or anything. And she was sitting over on the other side of the hall, not dancing. I said, well, maybe I ought to dance with her, you know? And so I had a partner, and I looked for her, and she wasn't there anymore. So I found the mother, and I said, where did your daughter go? Oh, she went out in the car. Why? weirded out. I says, what do you mean weirded out? She says, "No, this eye contact. She thought all these guys were coming on to her. And I finally said, who's the last guy she danced with? Turned out to be my carpool buddy, Al Perry. You know him?
I don't actually.
Well, he didn't come to me, so I can't point him out. But he's a lot of eye contact, you know, and plays around people when they're swinging and slapping, you know, does all kind of crazy, amusing things, you know. And he's got to be at least 65. Charming and harmless. Yeah. But this eye contact thing, really, you know, that only came in about 30 years ago. Wait, oh God knows. It was in English country dancing. And I understand it was in the kind of, if you can call it country dancing, in the Revolutionary period. It was in country dancing. It was vis-a-vis, which means face-to-face, rather than dos-a-dos, which means back-to-back. But it died out rapidly. And it was only brought back by callers who had studied English country dancing and thought that was cool, because they do that a lot in English country dancing, and they really went overboard with it. Good Lord, that if you're going to do a right and left through, if you went in the Boston area at one time, you're supposed to, pass through across the set and look into the courtesy turn. Most of us were quite uncomfortable with it when they started introducing it and doing gypsies in contra dancing, you know. And new people don't know what to make of it.
Locking eyes and walking around in a circle.
Yes. Yeah. And one of our callers went to Denmark. They have contra dance clubs in Denmark. Oh yes, and they do it all the same way. They balance the same way. Everything is by the book, and no fooling around. And I suspect it's older people. And one of the callers, he called the dance with a gypsy, and he had to explain it. And one of these guys, an older guy, went up to the caller and says, we just don't do that sort of thing here. He says, the only time we do the eye contact thing is, one, if we're in a bar and we want to pick a fight with somebody, and two, if we're in a bar and we want to pick up somebody and take them home. And I thought, normal Americans feel that same way. Mm-hmm. In fact, the world over, people feel the same way, I'm sure. And yet, with contra dancing, they've made us get used to it.
So do you think that Dudley Laughlin played a big role in that, since he went to England?
Oh, no. He didn't study English country dancing as recreated by Cecil Sharp. He studied what they were doing at the fun dances these days. And they don't do those moves at all. Yeah. Oh, it wasn't Dudley, believe me. I don't think he likes that at all.
I was watching in the Dudley Laughlin documentary.
Yeah.
For the swing, the man had his hands on the woman's hips, and she had her hands on his shoulders, and they swung around like that. Was that?
I don't think that was standard practice.
Okay.
But it took Dudley dances way back when, There might have been a couple of people doing stuff like that.
Has the swing always been in the more ballroom type of frame?
Oh yeah, ever since even before the modern contra dance revival. Oh yeah.
Why do you think that is? The ballroom frame versus any other type of hold for?
I don't know, that ballroom framework probably got started back in the middle 1800s with the polka and the waltz and turning couple dances, Janusz, and spread into square dancing. Before that, what they did was two-hand. Really.
Like on the playground in elementary school?
Yeah, kind of like that. Yep. In fact, some places, the church, some churches wouldn't let them do ballroom hold.
You need room for the Holy Spirit.
In fact, the Amish of Western New York State do some of that dancing, but it's all two hands. They don't want you getting that close.
you. There's always a waltz between the first half and the second half of the contra dance. And you mentioned that after the Swedish couples dancing, there was a waltz. Why is that? What's the waltz for?
I don't know. So you can get to be a little more intimate and carry on a conversation, maybe.
Is that something that started with the contra dance revival, or is that something that goes way back to your knowledge?
Well, when I first started, and discovered contra dancing, there was no such thing as getting in the car and saying, well, we're going to a contra dance. You go to a dance, and in the whole evening, you might do 4 different contra dances, and 4 or 5 different sets of 3 squares each. And in between each one of those, there was either a waltz, foxtrot, polka, way back, or it might have been a schottische or something. But they always put some kind of a couple dance or a ballroom dance in between one dance and the next dance. Contra dance, ballroom dance, square dance, contra dance, ballroom dance, a different one, and like that. And they didn't call it. In an evening here, we call 11 different contra dances on the average 11. And they're all different dances. And nobody remembers their name. Back in the 30s, just before it died out, people knew the name of every dance and they knew those favorite ones. Wedding Moscow, Victory, Chorus J.
Was Chorus J one you just listed?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that was one. We spoke with David
That's
Cantini
been
as
around
well as
since
the one
since
listener.
the early 1800s, and that Contra Corners movement was probably in 2 or 3 dances before 1800.
And the contra corners is sort of a square dance type of movement?
Oh no, nothing like that in square dance.
Okay.
Well, if you know both, you can see that there's something like that going on, but no one thought of it that way. It may have come from Scottish country dancing too, because all through the last half of the 1600s and 1700s, first there was one company publishing 24 English country dances for the year 1698, and then 2 companies, publishing companies, each one would produce 24 new dances for the year 1776 in England, and that's all accessible somehow. I don't have a complete collection. I might have 1 or 2 of them. So they wrote dances like crazy. Went around teaching the latest dance.
When did younger callers come into play? I guess
All the time.
all the time. Was that a part of the revival, or was that something that started with the first contra movement?
Well, I was one of their younger callers once.
I didn't mean to insinuate you were. I guess my question then is, the callers started as dancers first, correct? The callers needed to learn the dances before they could become callers, or did they start as callers? And then if they started as callers, were they completely fledgling callers?
Well, I'm sure they always learned to dance, the dances before they decided to be dance teachers or callers.
Running out of time here.
Do you have any other questions?
Perhaps, how did you start calling? How did
How did you get interested in calling contra dances versus?
Well, first I got square dance, and then it was only a little step to call contra dances. But I couldn't sell contra dancing to my square dance customers, either in the modern Western style, because I was in that for a while, 22 years, and I was calling traditional square dances before that. And Connecticut, contra dancing had been dead for a generation, no longer was part of the whole picture like it was. Up to the middle 30s, maybe. So I tried to get people to do a contra dance, and if they were already square dancers, they were having too much fun, and they thought contra dancing was weird, and they didn't want anything to do with it. And Boston, defending Boston against the North Korean bombers that never came. Well, we were afraid the Russians were going to get into the Korean War or something. So I had every night off, and I went Scottish country dancing one night of the week, English country dancing another night of the week, Irish Gaelic dancing another night, folk dancing another night, and then for the weekend, go square dancing. And every time I went square dancing, there was a square/contra dance every Tuesday at the Boston YW and every Wednesday at the Boston YMCA. And I began to enjoy conferences being just as fun as squares.